Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me this morning. For those who do not know me yet, my name is Ron Levine from Mindfulness in Blue Jeans. I fell ass backwards into mindfulness and insight meditation in 1998 during a time when I was dealing with clinical anxiety and depression and a panic disorder that had blown up into agoraphobia. So I was unable to leave the house. I was on disability. Couldn't go past my front door without a meltdown of panic. Happened to get paired up with a psychologist who at the time, even back then, was several decades deep into teaching and practicing mindfulness and insight meditation. And this is what he offered me as a way of dealing with what I was going through. I was not impressed with his suggestion. My feeling was, hey, I can't get out of the house. I can't work. I can't do anything. My life stopped. And here's a guy saying, well, what happens if we sit and watch the breathing for a while? Fantastic. I'm going to get right on that. My feeling was, all right, I don't really have anything else. He's not giving me anything else. I'm sitting at home all day freaking out anyway. I'll give this a good, honest shot just so I can go back to him and say, look, dude, this didn't work. Can I have the real treatment now? And this was 24 years ago this month, April of 1998, that this happened. And I haven't had that conversation with him yet. My guess is at this point, I'm probably not going to. I'm still practicing. Now I'm teaching. I appear to have found some value in all of this. And so here we are. Today's session is a little bit different from what I normally do. A couple of times a year, I like to do this after Enlightenment, the laundry, which is not something I came up with. I think I cribbed that from a book or some such. So that's not mine. But I love what it conveys. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So this is not one of my typical sessions where we're going to do sort of a traditional sitting after the talk. But I'm giving folks the option of engaging in some kind of activity off the cushion while practicing mindfulness, presence, awareness. If that is not something you want to do, by the way, you are perfectly welcome to just sit, and that's fine too. And you may change your mind in between whatever you're doing and switch. Say, oh, this doing something's not working, so I'm going to go sit. Or you might be sitting and say, you know what, maybe I will give this a... Yeah, it's your practice. It's your practice. So feel it out. Now, why would we want to engage in mindfulness, awareness, and so forth while we're doing random daily stuff? There's this old joke that says you should meditate for 20 minutes a day unless you don't have the time, in which case you should meditate for an hour. And there are a couple of things that we can take from that. One is, in my experience, this practice actually shows me where I can free up time. Because if you can't find 20 minutes to sit and be with yourself, what's here, what's coming up, that's kind of a red flag. Kind of a red flag. You can't find 20 minutes in a day to do that. Might want to take a look at what we're doing that's brought us to that place. Of course, there are sometimes extenuating circumstances beyond our control that may lead us to that. But if that's a long-term thing, we might want to see where we can make some changes, if at all possible, to make things a little more manageable, a little more sustainable, because that's not a sustainable situation. So this practice can actually show us where we can start to free up some time. And how does it do that? Well, that brings me to part of the second meaning here. The whole point of the practice is not mindfulness or insight or any of that stuff for its own sake. These teachings come from the historical Buddha, who only taught one thing. How do we alleviate our own suffering? Or sometimes instead of suffering, because that can be kind of a loaded term, just think stress. How do we ease our own stress? Not pain per se. We don't have a choice about pain. But stress, suffering, these are the things that arise when we don't deal with pain skillfully. And we end up causing ourselves more problems. So we start to break that cycle of pain leading to suffering, which leads to more pain, which leads to more suffering, through clear seeing. That's where mindfulness, awareness, insight, that's where this comes in. We start to see our role in that cycle, because the cycle doesn't happen by itself. It requires the mind. And more specifically, it requires a misuse of the mind. Well-intentioned misuse, right? We're trying to make pain stop, but we're not doing it in the most skillful way. And this is what we're trying to see. What am I bringing to the proceedings here that are causing shit to go sideways? All right? So it's not a matter of blaming ourselves, because again, we're well-intentioned. It's a matter of seeing how to get out of our own way. This is what I needed back in those days when I was trapped at home with agoraphobia. My panic disorder was not in relation to anything other than a fear of the sensations of panic. I mean, talk about a vicious cycle. I was completely getting in my own way, thinking about panic, thinking about how to stop panic, and in the course of doing so, causing myself panic. So was sitting on a cushion for 20 minutes a day going to help with that? Not so much by itself. Was it helpful? Yes. Was it sufficient? No. No. If I was going to make a dent in the garden of misery I had planted and grown for myself, I was going to need something with a little more consistency, a little more persistence, a little more ardency, sustained, skillful effort, which meant what? Well, I was going to have to take that cushion practice off the cushion. And this is exactly what I did. I had a conversation with that psychologist who got me started. Back in those early days, he said, if you weren't trapped at home, what would you do right now? And I said, well, I'd probably go to Harvard Square. Okay? This was the 90s. Harvard Square was still a little cool back then. He says, well, why don't you go to Harvard Square? I was like, I can't go to Harvard Square. I'll have a panic attack. He's like, understood. Not minimizing that. Extremely uncomfortable and scary experience. No question about it. But then what? I look at him, I'm like, dude, did you not hear what I said? Hello, panic attack. It's like, got it. Understood. But then what? And then he just shut up. He was going to make me talk next. And I sat there and thought about previous panic attacks and finally was forced to grudgingly admit, well, I guess at some point it would have to stop. He's like, yeah. But I had gotten stuck on this frozen nightmare image of me in the middle of Harvard Square, you know, in the pit at the T-stop, right? Completely losing my shit. And like the image just stopped there. And that got in my way. Now, after having this conversation, did I just run out to Harvard Square? Fuck no. Absolutely not. But what I did start to do was walk the block around my apartment. That was all I could handle at the time. I started to walk around the block. And when I was walking around the block, damn well better believe I was practicing my mindfulness, my awareness. I was exquisitely in tune with every footstep on the ground. I live in Waltham, Massachusetts. For those of you familiar with Waltham, you might know Moody Street. where all the restaurants and the shops are. In the summer of 1998, as I branched out further and further from my house, wore a tread up and down Moody Street. And I have these distinct memories of the heat that summer, the sunlight beating down, the feel of walking on those concrete sidewalks, looking at the storefronts, feeling my breathing coming in and out, and noticing all of the sensations, the perceptions, the reactions, what was happening. But using this choiceless awareness with which to observe it. Because Lord knows what I'd been doing for the previous almost 10 years, which was interfering with all of that stuff and trying to make it feel a certain way. That wasn't working. Wasn't working. In fact, it was causing more stress and suffering and completely exhausting me in the process, which itself caused more stress and suffering. Back in the in-person days of these, and hopefully in the near future we can get back to that, I was running a workshop where one of the attendees during the Q&A session said to me, I've heard about doing this mindfulness stuff and I've tried dabbling with it and doing it off the cushion. And the other morning, I tried practicing awareness while brushing my teeth before work. But I'm not really sure what the point was. I said to him, okay, well, what do you normally do when you're brushing your teeth? He says, I'm thinking about the commute to work and if I'm late and what I have to do at work that day and if I have meetings and, okay. So between that or the mindful presence and awareness that you brought to your brushing of the teeth, which was the more pleasant experience? He said, well, the one where I wasn't worrying about work and everything. I said, well, that's the point. That's the point. It's that simple. We don't need to be seeking some grand enlightenment here. That's not why I got into this practice. I didn't get into this practice for enlightenment. I got into this practice so I could get the fuck out of the house. That was enough. If you can simply observe brushing your teeth, and that reduces your stress level because of what you're not doing, that's enough, isn't it? I mean, I'll take that. I'll take that. All right? This practice isn't about what we gain, is it? It's about what we lose. And about what we leave behind that we don't need. That psychologist who got me started, I've mentioned this in the last couple of sessions, he drew a great metaphor for this, which is it's like when you're building one of those lawns using grass plugs, those big grass plugs, and you just donk, donk, huck them in the ground, and eventually you've got a lawn. That's kind of what this is. We've got this barren sort of wasteland, right? And we might remember at one point, oh, you know what? Let me come to my breathing. Let me come to sensation, perception, see what's coming up, see what I'm doing with what's coming up. Let me just observe this for a bit. That's a grass plug, donk. And then we do it again, donk, donk. You start to see, start to fill in a little bit. And the more we do it, the more we remember to do it, which is really what mindfulness is about, is remembering. In Buddhist terminology, mindfulness is a function of memory. It's not awareness. It's a function of memory, remembering what we have done in the past that has been skillful, that has reduced our suffering, our stress. So as we continue to do it, we continue to remember it more. The habit forms. And this lawn starts to fill in. But we're not going to fill in that lawn if we're just doing cushion practice. One of the other ways that it'll help is we run into different challenges on and off the cushion. On the cushion, we may be more likely to, start feeling sleepy, start feeling bored. We're going to have a whole host of other challenges out in the world, aren't we? If you think you have a strong practice, go have dinner with your family. Right? I'll have a whole host of other things that come up when we start dealing with other people. And what's the point of getting good at sitting on a cushion and being relaxed if we're just going to go out and start actually living off the cushion and we go to pieces? It's not really helping us that much. Then we start to use the practice on the cushion as an escape. And that's not what we're doing. We're not trying to distance ourselves from life. Lord knows when I got started, I was fully distanced from life. This is about living. Right? So 2 things I want to draw attention to that you might notice as we go through today's sitting or not sitting, depending on whether you want to sit or do something off the cushion. Something to notice is, what are we bringing to the practice? What are we bringing? We have a role in this. Just like we have a role in our stress and suffering, we have to have a role in decreasing our stress and suffering, right? If we're going to lose some of that stress and suffering, it's not about what we gain, it's about what we lose. If we're going to lose some of that, well, it's not just going to happen. We're the ones who created it. We need to deconstruct it. So we see, what are we bringing to it? What do I mean by this? 2 people doing the same task can have very different experiences of it, depending on their individual sensations, perceptions, interpretations, memories, past experience, associations. One of the examples I like to give a lot is that of an overgrown lawn. Okay, another lawn metaphor. That's the theme for today, okay? Think about what an overgrown lawn looks like to a landscaper. It's a day's work. What it looks like to a child. Playground. What it looks like to a cow. Lunch. Same lawn. All bringing something different to it. That summer that I was trapped at home, living in our apartment, we didn't have a dishwasher. And one of the things I remember most distinctly is silverware. Good Lord, was silverware a pain in the ass to wash by hand. There'd just be so much of it, and it was small, and you had to... Washing dishes was a huge part of my practice that summer. I remember we didn't have AC, nothing. So we were in a very hot apartment, small, hot apartment. It's the dead of summer. There's all this hot water going. Pain in the ass. Pain in the ass. There was a lot there to be present with. A lot to feel and observe. And was every bit as significant a practice for me as my daily sitting was. There really wasn't a whole lot of difference between the two. Different things came up, different things to work with. Same practice. Just another grass plug. And the other thing that we might notice is, what are we doing on autopilot? What are we missing as we're doing these things on autopilot? Because like I said, the things I recommended for today, if you're going to do something off the cushion, something simple, folding some clothes, doing some dusting, washing some dishes, These are things we tend to do on autopilot. They're easy to do. We've done them a million times. Boring as hell, right? Got all kinds of other things we'd rather be doing. Maybe you haven't paid attention to it in decades. One of the most fascinating things for me, the first time that I practiced walking meditation, because we don't have to sit, right? You can sit, you can lie down, you can stand, you can walk, you can wash the dishes. When I practiced walking meditation for the first time with a teacher, and he did it extremely slowly. The walking was extremely slow. And I had the worst time trying not to fall over. I had no idea how critical our momentum is to our balance when we are walking. Kind of like trying to ride a bike extremely slowly. You can ride a bike fast and just shoom. You try and do it really, really slow, right over, right? It's fascinating to me. I'd been walking for decades. Had no idea. No idea. So the point here is seeing the doing, not looking to get it done. We're not trying to talk ourselves into thinking that this is an enjoyable experience if it's not. We're simply seeing what the experience is as it unfolds. We're not passive recipients of our experience. We're bringing something to it, and as it processes and unfolds, we then take in that information and have reactions to that. A last example that I'll give is I remember when I first started driving when I was 16. My mom taking me out and, I had my learner's permit and the whole deal. Those first few weeks that I was driving, I was so hypervigilant about what I was doing that I remember my right leg, I used to call it iron leg. My leg felt like iron because the entire time that I was using the accelerator and the brake pedal, I was clenched so hard trying to make sure I didn't screw up and hit something. Or by the time I got out of the vehicle, the feeling between my two legs was ridiculous. Like my left leg is completely fine. My right leg was just this chunk. It was just ridiculous. But within 6 months, I was probably, I was to the point where I am today. I could go driving for an hour somewhere. And by the time I arrived there, realized I don't remember a damn thing from the trip. Got us there fine. Completely on autopilot. So what are we missing? And doing this with any kind of task is informative. Doesn't matter what it is, because how we do anything is how we do everything. How we do anything is how we do everything. So let's sit for a bit, or not. But even if you are engaging in an off-the-cushion activity, let's all start on the cushion, and I'll let you know when to start moving off, okay? And let's all begin, as we always do, imagining that we are suspended from the ceiling by a string attached to the top of our head. As a nice cue to sit up straight without adding any extra tension to do so. Tension, just another kind of stress, right? And we're not here to add stress. We're here to lose stress. Now, can we force stress away? No. That would be adding tension to tension. That would just ironically cause more stress, like all the issues I caused myself with panic. So if there is tension, a form of stress, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. It is allowed to be here. And it is allowed to leave in its own time. That may be today. It may not. That's okay. I also like to notice what is supporting me. The chair, the floor. So there's a sense of grounding. Even if I don't feel particularly grounded at the moment, something is supporting me. It's capable of doing the job, and I can allow it to do so. Let's take a moment to notice that grounding at the bottom, the lift at the top, and whatever else may be part of your experience right now in between, exactly as it is. Even if that includes maybe not liking exactly as it is. And let's begin to bring our attention to our breathing, exactly as it is. It's very difficult to bring our attention to our breathing without starting to shape it in some way, particularly if we are practicing meditation and we think we need to have a certain kind of breath for it. We do not. Our meditative breath is simply the breath that is happening as we are meditating. That choiceless awareness that I mentioned earlier, we just see how it's unfolding. And if we are so accustomed to shaping it or trying to control it, as I once was, that we are unsure how to stop, then we simply notice that as well. Again, we don't need to try to force it to stop. That is adding tension to tension, stress to stress. So if there is controlling happening, just notice the controlling, exactly as it is. You may notice the passage of air through the nostrils, the back of the throat, chest, diaphragm. You may follow the entire trajectory of an in-breath and then an out-breath, whatever you like. But in some way, bringing attention to the breathing process and how it unfolds. I'm going to read a short quote from an American monk that I quote a lot, Thanissaro Bhikkhu, before we begin the off-the-cushion portion of the practice. One of the problems in teaching meditation to people in America is that very few of us have learned any skills requiring that kind of steadiness, that kind of patience. Here, when you sharpen a knife, you just run it through the knife sharpener. Zip, zip, and it's done. Over in Thailand, though, when I had to sharpen a knife, I was given a big stone and a knife and told, okay, be very careful not to be in too great of a hurry, because if you get impatient, you may ruin the blade. So you have to be very consistent, very steady, and very patient as you work the blade over the whetstone. As you do this, you learn all the mental skills that go along with being patient. How not to get bored, how not to give up. The kind of conversation in the mind that helps keep it going. If you have any skills like that, think back on how you've talked yourself into being patient, consistent, persistent, and then apply those skills to the breath. If you're engaging in an off-the-cushion practice, please slowly rise, maintaining your focus on the breathing. Simply rise. And once you have fully risen, slowly walk halfway to where your task is. Slowly. Perhaps slowly enough, like when I did that walking meditation and found, wow, I lose my balance when I'm walking this slowly because I don't have momentum to carry me. And when you get halfway to the task area, stop. Notice on your way to that halfway point, or at the halfway point if you are there, where's the attention? Still with the breathing? Did we lose it a little? If you lost the breathing, are you condemning yourself for having lost the breathing? That's just a thought process. It's allowed. But is it increasing or decreasing suffering? Is it helpful? Not helpful. What else is coming up in the mind? Perhaps there's impatience. Or perhaps there's a feeling that, wow, it's nice not to be in a rush. Maybe it's even possible to feel both. Maybe you're feeling neither. It's less about the content of what is coming up. It's about the process of seeing it come up. And what we're doing with it when it does. Now slowly, with awareness of the physical movement and the breathing, which is part of your physical movement, and in fact is driving the physical movement, slowly walk the rest of the way to your task. Notice that we haven't started the task yet. Or perhaps, maybe some of us did on autopilot. And again, it's not about blame. It's not about, oh, caught you. No. No. It's not about blaming ourselves. It's about catching what we do on autopilot. Because most of that getting in our own way stuff, I mean, are we really consciously thinking to ourselves, I'm going to do this to get in my own way? No. We're doing that shit on autopilot. A lot of this stuff we've been doing for decades. We don't even see it anymore. That's why we don't know how to unravel the problems we're creating for ourselves. This is exactly what we're trying to tease out here. This is clear seeing. We have to understand the process, understand the problem, understand the system in order to know how to skillfully deconstruct it. So let's now begin whatever that task is. But let's do it at half speed. Remember, we're not looking to get it done. We're seeing the doing. Can we hold the breathing? And slowly, half speed, engage in the task at the same time. Can we extend the breath awareness to include our activity? Can you notice the pure sensation of whatever it is you're doing? Like when I was talking about washing the dishes, the heat, steam, smell of the soap. Try to keep it at half speed. Notice if you've started to speed up a little bit. Perhaps you've slowed down. That's fine. In fact, let's all slow down. That half speed that we were doing, let's cut that in half. Go at 1/4 speed. What comes up when we engage in a task that maybe we normally try to get through as fast as possible, while thinking about 18 million other things? What happens if we engage with that task at 25% speed? Simply paying attention to it and anchoring on the breathing. What comes up? Impatience, frustration, curiosity, relief, humor? Nothing? What comes up? When we make changes, when we set different causes and conditions, what comes up? What are the effects? This act of changing the causes and seeing the effects is critical, necessary, when building any kind of a skill, because it's creating a feedback loop. We make a change, we see a result, and we gain new information. And based on that information, we get an idea of what we need to change. And then we make that change, and that changes the causes and conditions, and the effect changes, and we receive more information. And the process continues. This is what we're doing in a mindfulness and insight meditation practice, is applying that principle to how we are actually living. But we get better and better at doing that if we're doing it in multiple areas of our life, right? It's what we have to do if we're learning a musical instrument or a new job. And it's something we can bring to our 25% speed task right now. Through our felt sense, maybe our visual sense, depending on what task you're doing. We're receiving feedback at every moment about how we're doing and making adjustments. And learning how to do that means we're building a skill of becoming more skilled. Which means when it comes time for the really big stuff, like trying to get the hell out of our own way, now we've really got some sharp skills to bring to that. And in my experience, we're going to need them. How we do anything is how we do everything. One of the most common issues with doing something like the kind of tasks or chores you might be doing right now, and the reason why, and try to get it done so fast and daydream and autopilot our way through it, is we find it boring. Interesting thing about boredom. Boredom, in my experience, isn't boring. Boredom's a real interesting thing to look at. Lots and lots of aversion there. We'll do anything not to feel bored. Which is why we're rushing and autopiloting, and right? Interesting thing to look at. What the mind does when boredom arrives. I don't know about you, but for me, that's when shit goes haywire. Boredom? Oh, no. Interesting thing to watch. Boredom comes and our mind says jump and we say how high. And that's often how we get in our own way, isn't it? Now, we don't have to engage in our tasks at 25 or 50% speed to engage with them in a mindful and an aware way. We're simply practicing it that way here because for most of us, we don't do it this way very often, so we need some practice. But I do invite you, if you like, for this last minute or so, that we will be off the cushion for those of you that are, to go ahead and, if you like, continue the task at maybe back at the 50% speed, maybe 75%, maybe at your normal speed. And just see what the effect is. And if we can stay with the breathing, just as we were at the slower speed, if we can notice sensation, perception, whatever else might be coming up in the body, the mind, at whatever speed you've chosen. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. It's just about seeing what the effect is after changing the cause, gaining that information, that feedback, so we know and have some new insights into how we are actually living. Let's stop doing our task, wherever we are with it. And slowly walk our way back to the cushion or the chair, whatever you might be using. And resume a seated position, or however you started. And I will close the sitting, now that we are sitting again, with another quote from Thanissaro Bhikkhu that talks a little bit about negotiating this kind of engagement with living and what we consider to be normal living, right? So try to get to this basic level where you're just looking at the building blocks. The very basic actions that then get constructed into larger and larger patterns as you're looking at your breath, as you're going out and functioning in the world. When you don't have any other duties, you can simply watch the process of how the I and forms meet. And then the way you comment on them. The way you direct your eyes to look at certain things in certain ways. That's a process too. You want to be able to shift in and out of that mode. Because if you work in this mode all day long, you wouldn't be able to function at work. You wouldn't be able to get along with people. But if you're good at shifting in and out of these modes, dealing on the level of people when you need to, dealing on the level of the building blocks when you have the opportunity, you learn a lot of interesting lessons about how the mind works, where the elements that lead to unskillfulness, lack of mindfulness, lack of discernment, lack of concentration, come from. You begin to catch them. It's like learning another language. You don't forget your original language. It's just that you learn how to function on another level, in a new context. And people who become bilingual begin to notice that they have a separate personality in the other language, a separate sense of how the world works in the other language, The process of becoming skilled in the other language is a very good lesson in learning how to take things apart in a new way, seeing processes as they happen. Then you turn around and you have a new perspective on your original language as well. Okay, I'm going to put a few links into the chat. The first link is to my website. These free sessions are supported by one-on-one sessions that I do with folks who are perhaps going through something challenging right now, as many of us are, and would like to use this practice and some of the context around it for some guidance. So if that's something of interest, you are welcome to visit my site and set something up, or just drop me a line if you have some questions about it. You can also get on my mailing list there. I send a message about once a quarter, so you're not going to get a lot of email from me. What else do I have here? My YouTube channel. You're welcome to subscribe there. I put up a new session every couple of weeks or so, as well as my Patreon page and my Venmo for anyone who is interested in helping to support these as well. And I have a couple of additional links. I've recently started doing live sessions on Insight Timer for those of you who are familiar with that. I've been on there a number of years with some of my sessions, but I've just started doing some of the live sessions. And with that said, let's get to my favorite part, which is hearing from you folks. A little Q&A. Hi, Susan.
Hey, Ron. This is my first time here.
Welcome.
And I cannot tell you, I'm an old meditator, TM, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I've been looking for something that really resonates for me, and today was awesome.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's great to hear.
Yeah. So the individual sessions that you have, those are donation. There's a certain amount that one would give you for your help.
There is a normal rate, and in fact, I had sent out a mailing to my mailing list I think it was this past week, that the rates will be going up as of May 1st. It's my first increase. It's a little overdue. The rate I have now is intended as like an introductory rate when I first started, and I just never got around to raising that, and it's way out of sustainability at this point. So that will be going up on May 1st. So if anyone's interested in one-on-one sessions, anything that is booked, you don't have to have the session prior to May 1st, but if you book it by May 1st, it'll be at the current rate, and it'll be going up on May 1st.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Got something.
You got something?
Yeah.
Yeah, bring it.
Okay. So what I was doing was putting pea gravel on the walkway outside the house.
Beautiful.
And yeah, I've needed to do it for ages and keep putting it off. And I figured, well, if I do it like this, maybe I'll get it done. And it was really cool because I did it by handfuls rather than if I'm doing something like that, take the bag, dump it, spread it out. And it was just kind of wonderful. I was sitting there looking at all the little rocks, and, it's like, oh, there's a little, there's a little piece of like a citron almost. And they were just, and then it made me look at like the bigger rocks in the walkway, and they've been there for 150 years. And when was the last time I actually looked at them? And it was just thoroughly enjoyable. So thank you. That was a really nice thing to be able to do this morning.
Cheers. That's terrific. First off, congrats to you for going and doing something outside, which is a great idea. I don't know if I would have even thought of that if I had been on the receiving end of this session. I probably would have just naturally thought of doing something inside, and you were extra smart about it and got outside, which is great. You just raised something that reminded me of something that I used to do when I was younger, and now realized like I never really stopped to do anymore, and this may sound a little weird. This is going to be one of those things that either resonates with people as like, I thought I was the only one, or y'all are just going to think I'm flat out nuts if you don't already. But I remember as a kid, sometimes I would notice a particular, it could be anything. I could be looking at a building, and like a brick building, and take particular notice of a brick and look at it and think to myself, has anybody besides me ever really paid attention to this brick? Like, I'm sure the bricklayer, like he was probably thinking about something as put the thing down. There's like, I don't know how many bricks go in a frickin' building, but thousands anyway, right? It's like, has anybody ever taken notice of this particular brick? What a weird, like I say, I'm probably the only one. I have no idea. But the point isn't that line of thinking. The point is, I couldn't tell you the last time I engaged in it.
Yeah.
Because autopilot, when we're a kid, we have that beginner's mind and we're taking in all this stuff for the first time and we're accepting it on its own merit, if you will, because we don't have a past baseline. We don't have a previous experience. We don't have a prejudgment to compare it against. So we just accept it the way it is and like, oh, isn't that interesting? And there's your beginner's mind. Now, that doesn't mean that we always want to have a complete and utter beginner's mind because we go out and get hit by a car. But where can we bring some of that beginner's mind to our experience again in such a way that it helps clear away some of the dysfunction? Because it's got its uses, but we also misuse it. These mental shortcuts that we make, they're necessary, they're useful, but like any other tool, they're not good for everything, right? Cheers, both for sharing that and reminding me of one of my own autopilots that I have not noticed for decades. Thank you for that.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Cheers, you too. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Ron. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, good afternoon.
I just happen to have some input. Before the sitting, you were discussing back in your early day how you had panic, and your panic sometimes took the form of panicking about panicking.
Always. Yeah, always.
And one of it just spurred in me the remembrance that one of the things that bugs me the most about myself is that I'm constantly thinking about what I'm thinking about, as if whatever I'm thinking about, I need to structure into a paragraph to tell someone what it is that I'm thinking about. Like I'm having a hard time explaining what I'm thinking about here because that's what it is, thinking about thinking. And I just can't get that out of my head once it takes hold. And I find that I miss a lot of stuff sometimes because I'm thinking about thinking. Just a thought, just
another thought.
I don't know if it's even relevant here, but
that is extremely relevant because you just described and said how it's getting in your own way. You miss stuff.
Yeah.
That's actually what I'm going to be talking about on Wednesday on the Insight Timer session. Gaining respite from the mind is exactly what you're talking about. Without getting too much into it, it's again noticing the process rather than the content. You're almost sort of developing what you might call like a meta content. Not meta, METTA, like from Buddhism, but meta, content about content. You are generating this content. And by the way, I deeply resonate with what you're saying. I do exactly the same thing, formulating it into basically an elevator speech. So if someone said, hey, what's going on? And you had to tell them, here's what's going on. So you're not sitting there like, oh, let me try to describe it. I love communicating through written word rather than talking when I can, so that I can get my thoughts out exactly the way I want them and, prune it just right and then send it out like, yes, that's rather than talking, in which case it's like I go back and I think, well, did I say it the way? Oh shit, I left this thing, right? That I totally with you.
I do an email, I do an email and I edit it and I read it and I edit it and I read it. And, it could be a paragraph, but it takes me an hour to take care of it, because I'm always sort of thinking I'm being graded on my word usage and my punctuation. And I don't know, I've got these fears of being judged, I guess.
Well, I can absolutely say that we have just confirmed your humanity. You are definitely a person.
Cool.
And I'm right here with you.
Cool. We've made it.
Yeah, I do. We're here. We're here. Now, what are we going to do with it? So notice that we're not just spinning this content, but now we're spinning content about the content. And if we can notice the process of the spinning of that content and begin to perhaps see what the motivation is, because we do everything for a reason. Anything we do because we believe we're going to get something out of it that is worth at least the effort we're putting into it. So in your case, that could be, I need to make sure I'm not judged. I'm going to need to make sure nobody catches an error in this. I need to make and then we step back and we say, it took me an hour to write this paragraph. Is that helpful? Did I cause or alleviate stress by this? Probably thought you were going to alleviate it because you could get everything right, but you spent an hour stressing out about it in the name of not having stress about it, right? So is the trade-off really there? Probably not. Could you have spent 55 minutes doing something else a little more skillful? Probably. And worst case scenario, you had, I don't know, a spelling error or something in your paragraph. So what? What is the actual worst case scenario that we've spun for ourselves out of that? Are you going to remember it a year from now? Probably not. And if you do, and you're still stressing out about it, well, that might be something else to look at too. This is exactly it. This is seeing the process of how we're creating our suffering and getting in our own way. And you described it beautifully. And like I say, I deeply resonate with it. And I'm fairly certain we are not the only two people here who do this. So
cool.
I hope that helps. And if you can, maybe try joining Wednesday morning if you're on Insight Timer, if you'd like to join for that.
Okay. Now, I don't understand Insight Timer.
If you have an app you can download on your phone, and it's free. There's no cost for it. And when you create an account and fire it up, search for Mindfulness in Blue Jeans, and you'll find their pages for the live sessions, and they have a little thing where you can add it to your calendar, and you just log into it at the time, and that one's at 5 o'clock on Wednesday, and you'll see me.
5
You'll see
p.m.
my background. Yep, 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight, and you'll see me, and it'll be similar to these sessions. You may find that one helpful.
Okay, maybe I'll catch up to you there.
Awesome. Be great to see you.
Okay, thanks,
Cheers,
buddy.
Last suggestion I'll give. For most of us, it's just about lunchtime. Mindful eating. Hard as hell for me. See what it's like. See if you can prepare and eat your lunch half speed, anchored on the breathing, chewing, swallowing, the whole thing. And remember, the point is to see what comes up. When I set this cause and condition, what's the reaction? And then based on that reaction, what do I do? Because there's a space there between the reaction and the response, right? Reaction you don't have a choice about. Reaction is just what comes up. But then based on that reaction, like I said during the sitting, we get bored and the mind says jump. How high? Okay, what if we just hear the mind say jump and just stay? Then what does the mind do? And if we stay with that, then what does it do? And so forth. Interesting things can start to arise. Things that have been waiting to express maybe for decades, but didn't have the space. And now we're giving them the space. And, oh, holy shit, here they are. Right? But that's what we're here to see. That's what we're here to see. Thank you for joining me today. I hope to see some of you during the week on Insight Timer, perhaps. Feel free to drop me a line, any of the links that I left above. And we'll do it all again in a couple of weeks. And I hope to see you then.
Okay. Thanks, Ron. Everyone be well. Good to see you all.
Cheers, everyone. Have a great day.